The October morning in Aspen greeted residents with the first snow of the season. White flakes slowly settled on the roofs of Victorian houses and shop windows on Main Street, creating an idyllic picture of a mountain town where everyone knew their neighbors, and the loudest news was usually the results of school football games. Detective James Cole sat at his worn desk at the Aspen police station, sipping his cold coffee and reviewing reports of minor incidents from the weekend. Petty theft at a supermarket, a noise disturbance at a student party, a dog found without a collar. At 45, Cole had worked as a detective in Denver, where murder and serious crime were commonplace. Moving to Aspen 5 years ago after his divorce had seemed like the right decision. Here he could live out his retirement in peace, helping tourists find their lost car keys and sorting out family disputes. "Jim, the Millers are arguing over the fence again," Officer Tommy Reynolds said, peeking into the office. "Want me to go?" "No, I'll take care of it." Cole put down his files and reached for his jacket. "I need to stretch my legs." Across town at Mountain Motors, Michael Thompson was lying under the hood of an old Chevrolet, trying to figure out why the engine was making strange noises. At 29, he was one of the best mechanics in the area, having inherited his talent for repair from his father, who had started the business 30 years ago. Michael was a tall guy with strong hands, always stained with motor oil, and an open smile that all the customers liked. "Mike, your fiancé called," his partner Rick shouted from the office. "Something about flowers for the church." Michael climbed out from under the hood, wiping his hands on a rag. His wedding to Samantha Wilson was set for the following week, and to be honest, all the preparations were wearing him out a little. He was a simple guy and would have preferred a modest ceremony, but Samantha had dreamed of a beautiful wedding since she was a child, and he couldn't say no to her. "Tell her I'll call her back during lunch," Michael replied, diving back under the hood. At the same time, at the Aspen Medical Center, Emily Carter sat at the front desk, mechanically scheduling patient appointments and answering phone calls. At 27, she was a quiet, neat woman of average height with chestnut hair that she usually wore in a simple bun. Her colleagues considered her reliable and efficient, if a little reserved. "Emily, can you let Dr. Harris know that Mrs. Johnson's test results are in?" Nurse Linda asked as she passed the desk. "Sure," Emily nodded, her eyes still on the computer. A year ago, she had been dating Michael Thompson for 3 years. It was a serious relationship. They had even talked about getting married. But then something changed. Michael became more distant, called less often, and canceled dates. When he finally told her they needed to break up, Emily felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. She thought they would be together forever. The breakup was painful, but Emily tried to move on. She continued to work, see her friends, and help her mother around the house. On the outside, it seemed like she had gotten over the loss, but at night, lying in bed, she still sometimes thought about Michael and what had gone wrong in their relationship. The news of his engagement to Samantha Wilson reached her through mutual acquaintances a few months ago. Emily was surprised at how quickly he had found a replacement, but she tried not to show that it bothered her. After all, in such a small town, it was inevitable that you would run into former partners from time to time and hear news about their lives. Samantha Wilson was teaching math at Aspen Elementary School at the time. At 26, she was an energetic teacher who was adored by her students and respected by her colleagues. Samantha had moved to Aspen 2 years earlier from Colorado Springs, looking for a quieter life and a job in a small community. She met Michael by chance when her car broke down on the way to school, and he helped her fix it. "Miss Wilson, is it true that you're getting married next week?" asked 7-year-old Emma, one of her students. "Yes, it is," Samantha smiled. "But first, we need to finish these addition problems." The children laughed, and the lesson continued. Samantha was happy. Michael was a kind, honest man who loved her sincerely. She knew about his past relationship with Emily Carter. In a small town, such things don't stay secret. But it didn't bother her. Everyone has a past, and all that matters is the future they were going to build together. At the hospital in Aspen, Nurse Deborah Carter was checking patients' medical records before the evening shift. At 52, she was an experienced professional who had worked at the hospital for 20 years. Deborah had raised Emily alone after her husband died when her daughter was only 10, and she had always been concerned about her well-being. The last year had been difficult for Emily. The breakup with Michael had hit her hard, although she tried not to show it. Deborah had seen her daughter lose weight, become more withdrawn, and smile less. She had suggested that Emily see a psychologist or just talk to someone, but Emily always said she was fine. "Mrs. Carter, can you help with the patient in room 7?" asked a young doctor. "I'm coming," Deborah replied, putting her thoughts about her daughter aside. She needed to focus on her patients at work. That evening, Detective Cole finished investigating the Millers' dispute over property lines. As usual, the problem was resolved after a calm conversation and a look at the property documents. On his way back to the station, he drove past Michael's auto repair shop and saw that he was still working, even though it was almost 7 in the evening. Cole had known Michael since childhood. The boy had grown up in a good family, never gotten into trouble, hardworking and honest. People like that were the backbone of small towns like Aspen. He was soon to be married to that teacher from the school. They were a good couple, both young, hardworking, ready to start a family. All quiet, Cole said to himself as he parked his car near the property. And it was true. Aspen was almost always quiet. People here lived a measured life, followed established rhythms, and knew their place in the community. Serious crimes were rare, usually just drunken fights between tourists or bicycle thefts. That evening, Emily was sitting at home looking through photos on her phone. She stumbled upon some old pictures of her and Michael. They were happy, hugging against the backdrop of the mountains, laughing at a picnic by the lake. Why had everything changed? She never got a clear explanation. Michael simply said that they had grown apart, and that it would be better if they remained friends. Friends? How can you be just friends with someone you love with all your heart? Emily quickly closed the photos and put her phone away. She shouldn't think about it. Michael had made his choice, and soon he would have a new life with Samantha. She should have her own life too, separate from the past. But late that night, lying in bed and listening to the wind rustling in the branches outside her window, Emily couldn't sleep. Her thoughts returned to Michael again and again, like a broken record. She imagined his wedding, which was supposed to take place in a week, and saw his happy face next to Samantha at the altar. The image caused her physical pain. The Saturday before the wedding began with a clear morning. The October air was crisp and clear, and the mountains around Aspen were ablaze with the golden and red colors of autumn foliage. Days like these reminded residents why they had chosen to live in this corner of Colorado, despite the long winters and limited career opportunities. Michael woke up in his small apartment above a car repair shop feeling nervous and excited. In a week, his life would change dramatically. He was getting married to the woman he truly loved, and they were going to start a family. Samantha had already talked about children, about a house with a yard on the outskirts of town, about their plans for the future. Nervous? Rick asked when Michael came down to the workshop with a mug of coffee. "A little," Michael admitted. "I'm really nervous, if you know what I mean." Rick smiled. He was 5 years older than Michael and had been married for 3 years. "That's normal. I was nervous before my wedding too, but as soon as I saw Karen in her dress at the altar, all my fears disappeared." Michael nodded, sipping his coffee. He tried not to think about his past relationship with Emily, but sometimes the memories came back on their own. They had been together for 3 years, and he had really thought she could be his wife. But something inside him resisted taking that step. Emily was a good girl, but their relationship seemed predictable, safe, devoid of the spark he felt with Samantha from the moment they met. Breaking up with Emily had been painful. He had seen how much it had hurt her, and he felt guilty. But staying with someone out of pity would have been even worse. He hoped that, in time, Emily would find someone who would love her the way she deserved to be loved. At the house on Elm Street, Samantha stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, trying on her wedding dress for the last time before the ceremony. The white lace beautifully accentuated her figure, and the veil flowed down her shoulders like a cloud. Her mother had come from Colorado Springs to help with the final preparations. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Wilson said, adjusting the folds of the dress. "Michael will be thrilled." Samantha smiled, but deep down she felt a slight uneasiness. It wasn't because of the wedding. She was sure of her feelings for Michael. It was the reaction of some of the townspeople to their relationship that made her uneasy, especially the women who knew Emily Carter. Samantha had noticed the looks in the supermarket, heard snippets of conversations that stopped when she got closer.
"Mom, do you think we're doing the right thing by getting married here?" Samantha asked. "Maybe we should have gone to Denver or even to your place."
"Nonsense," her mother dismissed. "Aspen is your home now. These people are your neighbors and colleagues. If you're going to live here, you have to show that you're not afraid of gossip." Samantha nodded, but she couldn't shake her unease. She knew about Michael's relationship with Emily from his own stories. He said they had broken up by mutual agreement, but Samantha suspected it was more complicated than that. In a small town, it was hard to avoid running into your past. Emily was working the Saturday shift at the medical center, filling in for a colleague who was sick. Weekends were usually quiet. A few scheduled patients, a couple of emergency cases involving tourists who had overestimated their abilities on the ski slopes. "Emily, can you see the next patient?" Dr. Smith asked. "A young man with a sprained ankle?" Emily nodded and showed the patient into the office. Work helped distract her from the intrusive thoughts about the upcoming wedding. It was all anyone in town was talking about. In cafes, shops, and post offices, people discussed the details of the ceremony, the bride's dress, and the couple's honeymoon. Emily tried not to show that these conversations hurt her. She smiled when someone mentioned the wedding, and even said several times that she wished Michael happiness. But inside, something was gnawing at her, screaming at the injustice of it all. After work, Emily stopped by the grocery store for milk and bread. At the checkout, she overheard a conversation between two middle-aged women. "Remember how Emily and Michael used to go out together? I thought they were going to get married," said one. "Yes, I feel sorry for the girl. She's a good girl, hard-working, and as soon as the new teacher arrived, Michael immediately switched his attention to her," replied the second. "Men are like that. They always want something new and exciting." Emily felt the blood rush to her face. She quickly paid and left the store, ignoring the sympathetic looks of the cashier. At home, she stood under the shower for a long time, trying to wash away the feeling of humiliation and self-pity. Detective Cole spent Saturday sorting through his backlog of reports and planning his shifts for the coming week. Michael and Samantha's wedding was a big event for the town, and he wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. Usually, events like this didn't require much police attention, but it was better to be safe than sorry. "Chief, it's the Harrisons' wedding anniversary tomorrow night," Officer Reynolds reported. "They've booked a band from Denver. It might get noisy." "Keep your ears open," Cole nodded. "And don't forget about the wedding on Sunday. There'll be a lot of out-of-town guests." Cole looked over the guest list Michael had provided at his request. About 100 people, quite a lot for a local church. Relatives of the bride and groom, friends, colleagues, neighbors. A typical wedding for typical people in a typical town. On Saturday evening, Deborah Carter was preparing dinner for herself and Emily. Her daughter came home silent and distant, as she had been more and more often in recent months. Deborah understood that Michael's upcoming wedding was difficult for Emily, but she didn't know how to help. "Do you want to talk?" she asked cautiously as they sat at the table. "About what?" Emily poked at the mashed potatoes with her fork. "About what's bothering you. About Michael. About the wedding." Emily looked up. "Mom, I'm a grown woman. I can handle my ex-boyfriend marrying someone else." "You can, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Emily put down her fork. "Of course it hurts. But what can I do about it? Time heals all wounds, right? That's what everyone says." Deborah saw the pain in her daughter's eyes and felt helpless. "Maybe you should take some time off? Go somewhere for a week? Visit Aunt Jen in California?" "No," Emily replied sharply. "I'm not going to run away. This is my city too." After dinner, Emily locked herself in her room and turned on her computer. She knew she shouldn't, but she couldn't help herself. Samantha's social media was open to everyone, and Emily regularly checked her profile, as if picking at a scab. New photos from her dress fitting. Samantha looked happy and beautiful. Comments from her friends. "Stunning! Michael is so lucky. I can't wait for the wedding." Emily closed her browser and lay down on her bed, staring at the ceiling. It was starting to rain outside, the drops tapping rhythmically on the window. Tomorrow would be Sunday. the day before the wedding. And in a week, it would all be over, and she would have to come to terms with her new reality. But something inside her resisted this acceptance. Something dark and painful that had been growing inside her for a year since the breakup. Emily tried to ignore the feeling, drown it out with work and daily chores, but it only grew stronger. Why did Michael have the right to be happy while she had to suffer? Why did Samantha get what Emily had dreamed of? Was it fair? On Sunday morning, the entire Thompson family gathered at Michael's parents' house for their traditional breakfast before important events. Michael's father, Frank, was a man of few words, but at the table he gave a short speech about how proud he was of his son and how happy he was to welcome Samantha into the family. "Your mother would have been so happy," he said, referring to his wife, who had died of cancer 5 years earlier. She always wanted grandchildren. Michael nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He missed his mother and often thought about how she would have reacted to Samantha. They would have been friends, he was sure. After breakfast, Michael drove to the church where tomorrow's ceremony would take place. Pastor Miller met him at the entrance, an elderly man with kind eyes who had married half the couples in town. "Are you nervous?" the pastor asked as they walked toward the altar. "A little," Michael admitted. "But it's a good kind of nervous." "That's right. Marriage is a big step, but I've known you since you were a kid, Michael, and I've seen how you look at Samantha. You two are going to be great together." They discussed the details of the ceremony and checked the arrangement of the flowers and chairs. Tomorrow at this time, the place would be full of people, and Michael would be a married man. The thought both excited and frightened him. Samantha spent Sunday with her bridesmaids, throwing a bachelorette party at her house. Nothing special, just dinner, wine, and conversation. Her best friend from college, Jessica, had come from Denver, especially for the wedding. "Are you ready for married life?" Jessica asked when they were alone in the kitchen. "More than ready," Samantha replied. "Michael is a wonderful man, honest, kind, hardworking. He's exactly the kind of husband I wanted." "What about his ex? I heard they were together for quite a while." Samantha frowned. "Emily? That's in the past. They broke up over a year ago. But she still lives here. Isn't that weird?" "No stranger than in any small town," Samantha tried to sound confident, but Jessica's question had hurt her. "We're adults. We can coexist peacefully." Meanwhile, Emily sat at home alone while her mother was at work at the hospital. She tried to read a book, watch TV, do chores, but nothing helped distract her from thoughts of tomorrow's wedding. The whole town was getting ready for the celebration, and she felt like an outcast in her own home. By evening, she couldn't take it anymore and drove to the church. The lights were on, and someone was finishing the last preparations. Emily parked across the street and looked at the building where Michael would say, "I do" to another woman tomorrow. She imagined the scene in every detail. Samantha's white dress, Michael's happy face, the guests' congratulations, the newlyweds' first dance. Where would they live? They would probably buy a house on the outskirts of town, have children, and grow old together. And what would become of her? Lonely evenings, work, caring for her aging mother, the slow fading of her hopes for personal happiness. Emily gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The injustice of what was happening burned inside her like acid. She had given Michael the best 3 years of her life, loved him with all her heart, and planned a future with him. And he threw it all away like an old newspaper for the first woman who came along. When Michael came out of the church with the pastor, Emily quickly started the car and drove away without waiting for them to notice her. At home, she locked herself in her room and cried into her pillow for a long time until she fell asleep from exhaustion. Monday, the wedding day, began with a thick fog that enveloped Aspen like a shroud. The mountains disappeared in the gray haze, and the streets of the city seemed ghostly and unreal. By 9 in the morning, the sun began to break through the clouds, promising a clear day for the ceremony. Michael woke up before his alarm clock in his apartment above the auto repair shop. It was his last day as a bachelor, his last night in the small apartment that had been his home for the past 5 years. After their honeymoon, he and Samantha planned to rent a bigger house on the outskirts of town where they could get a dog and maybe in a couple of years have children. He got up and went to the window, looking out at the empty main street. In a few hours, His life would change dramatically. It was strange to think that yesterday he was just Michael Thompson, the mechanic, and tonight he would be someone's husband. The thought both excited and frightened him. "Big day," he said to his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Rick was supposed to arrive at 10 to help with the last-minute preparations and drive him to the church. The wedding was set for 2 in the afternoon, not too early and not too late to give guests from out of town time to get to Aspen. At the house on Elm Street, Samantha had been up since dawn. She had woken up with nervous excitement and couldn't get back to sleep. Her mother was making breakfast downstairs, and the bridesmaids were due to arrive at 11 to help her get ready. "How did you sleep?" Mrs. Wilson asked when Samantha came down to the kitchen in her robe. "I hardly slept," Samantha admitted. "But that's normal, right? All brides are nervous?" "Of course, dear. I couldn't sleep before my wedding either. Your father joked that I wore a hole in the floor from pacing back and forth." Samantha smiled, imagining a younger version of her mother in a similar state. It was good that some things never changed. Love, excitement before important life events, and family support were eternal. "Mom, what if something goes wrong?" Samantha asked suddenly. "What if it rains, or the priest forgets, or everything will be fine?" Her mother reassured her. "Even if something doesn't go according to plan, the main thing is that you're marrying the man you love." Emily arrived at work as usual at the medical center, even though Dr. Smith had offered her the day off. "I don't want to sit at home and think," Emily explained. Work gave her something to focus on other than the upcoming ceremony. There were several patients that morning: an elderly man with arthritis flare-ups, a young mother with a child who had a cold, and a tourist who had twisted his ankle on a mountain trail. It was the usual routine that helped Emily keep herself together. "Emily, you look pale," Nurse Linda remarked during their lunch break. "Maybe you should go home early?" "No, I'm fine," Emily replied, although she felt anything but fine. Inside, she was boiling and seething like a volcano about to erupt. Every time someone mentioned the wedding, and they mentioned it often, she felt physical pain in her chest. By noon, the fog had finally cleared, and the sun was shining brightly over Aspen. The town was getting ready for the celebration. Flower shops were arranging the last bouquets, tables were being set for the wedding reception at the Mountain View restaurant, and a photographer was checking his equipment. Detective Cole was on his usual patrol, but he was paying special attention to the area around the church. The parking lot was already filling up with guests' cars. He recognized license plates from neighboring towns. Relatives and friends of the bride and groom were arriving for the celebration. "Everything quiet?" he asked Officer Reynolds, who was on duty at the shopping center over the radio. "Quiet as a mouse," he replied. A couple of tourists asked for directions to the lake, nothing else of interest. Cole nodded to himself. It was good when the city was quiet, especially on days like this, when there were big events going on. He remembered weddings in Denver, where he had to break up fights between drunk relatives or catch thieves who were stealing from church parking lots. At 1 o'clock, Emily said she wasn't feeling well and asked Dr. Smith to let her go home. "Sure, go ahead," the doctor said. "You really don't look well. Maybe you've caught something." Emily nodded, not specifying that her illness was purely emotional. She gathered her things and left the medical center, not knowing exactly where to go. She didn't want to go home. Her mother would surely start asking her how she was feeling. It wasn't worth going to cafes or shops either. They would probably be talking about the wedding. Emily got into her car and just drove, not choosing a direction. A few minutes later, she found herself on the road leading to Maroon Lake, one of the most beautiful places in the Aspen area. She and Michael had often gone there during their relationship. It was there that he first told her he loved her. The lake was almost empty. It was a weekday, and tourist season was coming to an end. Emily parked at the lookout point and got out of the car. The autumn wind played with her hair, bringing the scent of pine trees and the first snow in the mountains. She stood at the railing, looking at the mirror-like surface of the water, which reflected the golden aspens on the opposite shore. This place held so many memories: picnics, long conversations about the future, kisses at sunset. It all seemed like a different life now, belonging to someone else. "Why?" she whispered into the void. "Why did it all turn out this way?" But the lake was silent, and the wind brought no answers. Meanwhile, final preparations were underway at Holy Cross Church. Florists arranged bouquets of white roses and lilies, musicians tuned their instruments, and Pastor Miller checked the microphones. The church, built at the beginning of the last century, looked especially solemn in the midday sun shining through the stained glass windows. Michael arrived with Rick half an hour before the ceremony began. He was wearing a dark blue suit that he had bought especially for this day in Denver. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror in the preparation room. "Breathe deeper," Rick advised. "Remember what my father said before my wedding? If you're nervous, it means you're making the right decision." Michael smiled. "Your father is a wise man." Of course he was. 40 years married to the same woman says something. He heard voices outside the window as guests arrived. Michael looked out and saw familiar faces, neighbors, customers from the auto repair shop, childhood friends. They had all come to share this important day with him. The house on Elm Street was in controlled chaos. The bride's friends were helping Samantha with her hair and makeup. Her mother was ironing her veil, and the photographer was taking pictures of the preparations. "You look like a princess," Jessica said when Samantha stood in front of the large mirror in the bedroom in her full gown. And it was true. The white lace dress fit her figure perfectly. The veil framed her face beautifully, and her eyes sparkled with happiness and excitement. Samantha felt like a fairy tale heroine who was about to get her happily ever after. "Time to go," announced Mrs. Wilson, glancing at her watch. Samantha took a deep breath, picked up her bouquet of white roses, and headed for the door. The limousine rented for the special occasion was waiting at the front steps. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Holy Cross Church was filled with guests. The groom's relatives sat on the right, the bride's on the left, although the division was rather informal as many knew both families. Detective Cole stood at the entrance, watching the proceedings. Everything was calm and orderly. Pastor Miller took his place at the altar. The musicians began to play a solemn melody, and the guests rose from their seats. Michael came out of the preparation room and stood at the altar next to the priest. His face showed a mixture of excitement and joyful anticipation. The church door opened, and Samantha appeared in the aisle, accompanied by her father. She walked slowly toward the altar to the sounds of the wedding march, while the guests admired her beauty and elegance. Michael looked at his bride with admiration and love. When Samantha reached the altar, her father kissed her on the cheek and gave her hand to Michael. The young couple stood face to face before the pastor, ready to exchange their vows. "Dear friends," Pastor Miller began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Michael and Samantha in holy matrimony." At that moment, Emily was sitting in her car in the parking lot near the medical center, unable to bring herself to drive home. She knew that the ceremony was taking place in the church at that very moment, and the thought was unbearable. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. She took out her phone and opened social media. Several guests had already posted photos from the ceremony. Samantha in a white dress, Michael in a dark suit, happy faces in the crowd. Emily looked at the pictures, and something inside her broke completely. The injustice of what was happening overwhelmed her. She had given Michael 3 years of her life, loved him with all her heart, dreamed of becoming his wife. And he had thrown it all away for the first pretty girl he met, who wasn't even from their town. "This isn't right," Emily whispered, clutching her phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "This isn't fair." The ceremony continued in the church. Michael and Samantha exchanged rings and vowed to be faithful to each other. Their voices sounded confident and solemn in the silence of the church. "Michael, do you take Samantha to be your lawful wife, to love her in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth? Until death do you part?" asked the pastor. "I do," Michael replied clearly, looking into his bride's eyes. "Samantha, do you take Michael to be your lawful husband, promising to love him in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, until death do you part?" "I do," whispered Samantha, and tears of happiness glistened in her eyes. Emily started the car and drove slowly through the empty streets of Aspen. The town seemed deserted. Everyone was either at church or at home preparing for the wedding reception. She drove past Michael's auto repair shop, past the school where Samantha worked, past the flower shop with a sign that said, "Closed for a wedding." Suddenly, she pulled over to the side of the road and got out. The autumn air was crisp and cold, stinging her lungs and sobering her up a little. Emily stood in the middle of the empty street, trying to figure out what to do with her pain, her anger, her sense of utter hopelessness. She thought about the future, about the long, lonely evenings, about how she would meet Michael and Samantha at the store or on the street, pretending that everything was fine, about how they would build a family, have children, grow old together, while she would remain alone with her memories and unfulfilled dreams. "No," she said aloud. "This isn't supposed to be happening." In the church, Pastor Miller was approaching the final part of the ceremony. "By the authority of the church and the state of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Michael, you may kiss the bride." Michael kissed Samantha tenderly, and the church erupted in applause and congratulations. The newlyweds turned to face their guests, holding hands, their faces beaming with happiness. Detective Cole smiled as he watched the joyful crowd of guests leave the church behind the newlyweds. A beautiful ceremony, a happy couple, satisfied relatives. It was events like these that made his job in a small town enjoyable. Emily got back in her car and drove home. Her mother was at work, and the house greeted her with silence and semi-darkness. She went to her room and lay down on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The ceremony was over. Michael was now a stranger's husband. But something inside her was still boiling and needed an outlet. Emily felt that if she didn't do something right now, she would explode from the emotions that had built up inside her. The injustice of what was happening burned her from within like red-hot iron. She got out of bed and went to the window. Cars were visible near the church. The guests had not yet left, probably taking pictures on the steps. Soon everyone would move to the restaurant for the reception, drinking champagne and congratulating the happy couple. And what would happen to her? Would she stay here, alone, with her pain and broken dreams? "No," Emily whispered again. "This can't go on." Tuesday, 6:30 a.m. Detective James Cole was awakened by the insistent ringing of the telephone. Half asleep, he fumbled for the receiver on the bedside table, squinting at the red numbers on the alarm clock. "Cole speaking," he said hoarsely. "Chief, we have a dead body." Officer Reynolds' voice sounded tense. "At the auto repair shop on Main Street. Michael Thompson." Cole was instantly awake. "Michael? The one who got married yesterday?" "That's the one. His partner Rick found the body when he got to work. He said he arrived at 6:30 as usual and the workshop door was open." Cole was already pulling on his jeans and shirt. "Cordon off the area, don't let anyone in. I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Already done. And this is definitely not an accident." Cole holstered his gun and ran out of the house. It was a cold and foggy October morning, with visibility no more than 50 meters. He turned on his siren and sped through the empty streets of Aspen toward Main Street. Mountain Motors was a one-story red brick building between a bakery and a fishing tackle shop. When Cole pulled up, the area was already cordoned off with yellow tape, and Officer Reynolds was standing at the entrance, writing something in his notebook. "What do we have?" Cole asked, showing his ID to the doctor on duty who had just arrived. "A 29-year-old man was found dead in the workshop at around 6:30 this morning," Reynolds reported. "He has a chest wound, probably from a knife. There's a lot of blood." Cole nodded and headed for the workshop entrance. Inside, he was met with a scene that would remain etched in his memory forever. Michael Thompson lay on his back near the workbench, wearing the same clothes he had worn at his wedding the day before, a white shirt, now soaked with blood, and dark pants. His face was peaceful, his eyes closed. If it weren't for the blood, one might have thought he was simply asleep. "Where's the person who found the body?" Cole asked. "Rick Morrison. He's sitting in the patrol car, in shock. He says he came to work as usual, saw the workshop door open, and went in to check." Cole carefully walked around the body, trying not to disturb the crime scene. Tools were scattered on the floor near the workbench. There had apparently been a struggle. The desk drawers were pulled out, and documents were scattered everywhere. But the cash register in the office was untouched, and the expensive tools were still in their places. "It doesn't look like a robbery," muttered the detective. The team of forensic experts arrived and began working at the crime scene. Cole went outside to get some fresh air and collect his thoughts. Just yesterday, he had watched this man's wedding and seen his happy face next to his bride. And now Michael was dead, not even a day into his marriage. "Detective Cole?" A young woman with a camera approached him. She was Jenny Park, a local reporter. "Can I get some details?" "No comment," Cole snapped. "The investigation is ongoing." But Jenny didn't give up. "Is this Michael Thompson, the one who got married yesterday?" Cole looked at her sternly. "Miss Park, you're interfering with the investigation. Put your camera away and step behind the tape." By 9 o'clock, the news of Michael's death had spread throughout the town. Cole knew that in a small community, it would be impossible to keep something like this under wraps, but he had to act quickly before witnesses had a chance to tweak their memories under the influence of rumors. His first stop was Samantha's house. The newly widowed woman lived in a rented house on Elm Street. When Cole pulled up, he saw several cars in the driveway. Apparently, relatives had already learned of the tragedy. The door was opened by an elderly woman with tear-stained eyes, Samantha's mother. "Mrs. Wilson, Detective Cole, Aspen Police Department. May I speak with your daughter?" "She's upstairs in her bedroom. She's in a terrible state," the woman said, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. "Who could have done this? Michael was such a good boy." Samantha was sitting on the bed in her bathrobe, hugging her knees. She looked completely devastated. Her eyes were red from crying, her face was swollen. Her friend was sitting next to her, stroking her shoulder. "Mrs. Thompson," Cole began delicately, "I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you a few questions." Samantha raised her head. "Will you find the person who did this?" "We'll do everything we can. Tell me, when was the last time you saw your husband?" "Last night. After the banquet, we got here around 11. Michael said he wanted to stop by the workshop to make sure it was locked. He sometimes forgot to lock it." Samantha sobbed. "I offered to go with him, but he said it would only take 5 minutes, and I could wait for him at home." "What time did he leave?" "Around 11:30. I went to bed thinking he'd be back soon." "And when did you realize he wasn't there?" "I woke up at 3 in the morning and he wasn't there. I thought maybe he'd fallen asleep in the workshop. He'd done that before." Samantha started crying again. "You should have gone to check on him. If I had gone—" "It's not your fault," Cole said firmly. "Did Michael have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt him?" Samantha shook her head. "Everyone loved him. He was kind and honest. He helped people for free if they couldn't afford to pay for repairs." "What about his ex-girlfriend, Emily Carter? How did she feel about your wedding?" Samantha's friend tensed up. "Emily? You think she could have—" "I'm not thinking. I'm investigating," Cole interrupted. "Samantha, were there any problems with Miss Carter?" "I don't know," Samantha replied uncertainly. "Michael said they broke up amicably, but sometimes I noticed her looking at us in the store or on the street. Not maliciously, just sadly." Cole jotted it down in his notebook. "I'll talk to her. Anything else strange lately? Threats? Suspicious phone calls?" "Nothing like that." Leaving Samantha's house, Cole drove to the medical center. On the way, he pondered the information he had received. The murder took place between midnight, when Michael left home, and 6:30 a.m., when he was found. The motive was unclear, but it didn't appear to be a robbery. At the medical center, he was met by the administrator, a middle-aged woman with a worried expression. "Detective, this is terrible! Michael was such a sweet boy! Who could have done this?" "I'm looking for Emily Carter. Is she at work today?" "Emily? No, she went home sick yesterday. She said she wasn't feeling well." "What time did she leave?" The woman looked in the logbook. "At 1 o'clock. Dr. Smith let her go." "Interesting." Emily left work just before her wedding. Cole asked for the address and drove to the Carter's house. The house on Spruce Street was a modest one-story building with a small garden. The door was opened by a woman in a nurse's uniform. Emily's mother was apparently on her way to work. "Mrs. Carter? Detective Cole, can I talk to your daughter?" Deborah Carter's face turned pale. "Emily? What happened?" "Michael Thompson has been found dead. Murdered." Deborah grabbed the doorframe. "Oh my God! Emily, Emily, come here!" Footsteps sounded from inside the house, and Emily appeared. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, dressed in her nightclothes. When she saw the detective, something flashed in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? "Miss Carter, I need to ask you some questions about Michael Thompson." "What's wrong with him?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "He's dead. He was killed last night." Emily staggered, and her mother supported her by the arm. "Killed? How?" "I'm trying to find out. Where were you last night between 11 and 7 this morning?" "At home. I was asleep." "Can anyone confirm that?" Deborah looked at her daughter anxiously. "I worked the night shift at the hospital. I left at 11 last night and came back at 7 this morning." So Emily had no alibi for the time of the murder. Cole watched her reaction closely. "Miss Carter, how did you feel about Michael's wedding?" "It was his choice," Emily replied, but her voice sounded tense. "We broke up over a year ago." "But you still had feelings for him?" Emily was silent for a few seconds too long. "We lived together for 3 years. Of course, it hurt when we broke up, but I wanted him to be happy." "Where were you yesterday during the wedding?" "At home. I wasn't feeling well, so I left work early." "What time did you get home?" "Around 2 in the afternoon." Cole wrote that down. So Emily had been home alone from 2 in the afternoon until 11 at night, when her mother left for work. Then alone again, until 7 in the morning. Enough time to get to the garage and back. "Miss Carter, do you have a key to Michael's car?" "No," Emily replied quickly. "Why would I have keys?" "Just checking all possibilities. Thank you for your time." As Cole left, he noticed Emily watching him from the window. Her behavior seemed suspicious to him, too nervous for someone who had just learned of her ex-boyfriend's death. His next stop was the hospital where Emily's mother worked. Cole wanted to check her alibi and find out more about his daughter's mental state. Deborah Carter met him in the doctor's lounge, still in shock from the morning's news. "Detective, you don't think Emily could have—" she began. "I don't think. I'm checking the facts. Please confirm your schedule for yesterday." "My day shift ended at 6 in the evening. I came home, had dinner with Emily, then left for the night shift at 11. I worked until 7 in the morning." "Can your colleagues confirm that?" "Of course. Ask head nurse Johnson." Cole nodded. "How did Emily handle the breakup with Michael?" Deborah hesitated. "It was hard. Very hard. She loved him, wanted to marry him. When he broke up with her, she couldn't get over it for a long time." "Did she see a psychologist?" "No, she refused. She said she could handle it herself." "How did she react to the news of his engagement?" "She pretended she didn't care. But I could see how much it hurt her, especially in the last few weeks when the whole town was talking about the wedding." Cole wrote it down. The motive was clear: jealousy and revenge. The opportunity was also there. No alibi for the time of the murder, but they needed proof. "Mrs. Carter, does Emily have access to knives or other cold weapons?" Deborah turned even paler. "We have regular kitchen knives at home. But Detective, Emily couldn't have killed anyone. She's a kind girl, not capable of violence." "Thanks for the information. If you remember anything else, give us a call." By noon, Cole was back at the crime scene. The forensic team had finished their initial work, and now he could take a closer look at the workshop. "What do we have?" he asked the lead expert. The victim suffered a single stab wound to the chest, between the ribs, right in the heart. Death was almost instantaneous. Judging by the blood spatter, the killer was standing directly in front of the victim. The murder weapon? A knife with a blade about 15 centimeters long. It looks like a kitchen or hunting knife. It wasn't found at the crime scene. Any signs of a struggle? Minimal. A few overturned tools, scattered documents, but there are no defensive wounds on the victim's hands. Either he knew the killer and didn't expect to be attacked, or he was taken by surprise. Cole examined the office area of the auto repair shop. On the desk were documents for various car repairs, a calendar with dates marked, and a framed photo of Michael with Samantha. The usual work environment of a man who did not expect to die. Any signs of a break-in? No. Either the door was open, the killer had a key, or he was let in. Samantha said that Michael sometimes forgot to lock the workshop. Perhaps the killer knew this and took advantage of the opportunity. Or maybe Michael let the killer in himself, someone he trusted. After lunch, Cole decided to talk to Rick Morrison, Michael's partner again. He was at home, still in shock from the morning's events. "Rick, tell me more about how you found the body." "I arrived at 6:30 as usual. I saw that the workshop door was ajar. I thought Mike had come in early and forgotten to close it. That happened sometimes. I went in and saw—" Rick couldn't finish his sentence. "Who else had keys to the workshop?" "Just Mike and me. And his father, Frank, but he hasn't used them in years." "Did you know about Michael's problems with his ex-girlfriend?" Rick thought for a moment. "Emily?" "I don't know if you can call it problems. Mike said the breakup was painful, but they remained on good terms." "Did she ever come to the workshop after the breakup?" "A couple of times. Once she brought her car in to be repaired, and another time she just stopped by to talk. Mike was polite to her, but kept his distance." "How did he react to the wedding? Was he nervous about anything?" "Just the usual pre-wedding jitters. But he was happy with Samantha. He said he had finally found his soulmate." That evening, Cole sat in his office sorting through the information he had gathered. The picture was starting to become clearer, but there were still many gaps. Facts. Michael was stabbed to death in his workshop between 11:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. The murder weapon had not been found. There were no signs of a robbery. The prime suspect was Emily Carter, the victim's ex-girlfriend. Motive: jealousy and revenge for the breakup and marriage to another woman. Opportunity: no alibi for the time of the murder, knowledge of the victim's habits. But something was missing. He needed hard evidence: the murder weapon, witnesses, or a confession from Emily herself. Cole knew he would have a serious talk with Miss Carter tomorrow. So far, he only had suspicions. But in a small town, murders don't just happen. And everything pointed to a woman who couldn't get over the loss of love. On Wednesday morning, Detective Cole arrived at the station earlier than usual. He had spent the whole night thinking over the details of the case, and now he had a clear plan. Emily Carter remained the only suspect with a motive and the opportunity to commit the murder. "Tommy, get the team together," he said to Officer Reynolds. "We need a search warrant for the Carter home." "I'm on it," Reynolds nodded. Judge Harris agreed to sign. At 9 in the morning, a group of police officers arrived at the house on Spruce Street. Deborah Carter opened the door in her bathrobe. She had just returned from the night shift. "Mrs. Carter, we have a search warrant," Cole said, handing her the document. The woman read the paper with trembling hands. "You think Emily—" "Where's your daughter?" "Upstairs, in her room." Cole went upstairs and knocked on Emily's bedroom door. The girl opened it almost immediately. She was dressed, but looked exhausted. "Miss Carter, we have a search warrant. Please go into the living room." While the officers methodically searched the house, Cole watched Emily. She nervously fiddled with the sleeves of her sweater, glancing at the stairs. "Detective!" an officer called from the kitchen. "One knife is missing." On the kitchen table was a set of knives in a wooden block. One slot was empty, the one for a knife with a blade about 6 inches long. "Mrs. Carter, where is the knife from this set?" Deborah looked confusedly at the block. "I don't know. Maybe in the dishwasher?" They searched the entire kitchen. The knife was nowhere to be found. Emily turned pale at the mention of its disappearance. "Miss Carter, do you know where the knife is?" "No," she whispered. The search continued for 2 hours. In Emily's bedroom, in the laundry basket, they found an important clue. "Detective, look." Officer Jones held up the clothes. Jeans and a sweater with bloodstains. Cole examined the items. There were distinct dark stains on the dark clothing. "Are these your clothes?" he asked Emily. She nodded without raising her head. "Where did the blood come from?" "I cut myself in the kitchen a few days ago." "With what kind of knife?" Emily fell silent, realizing she was being trapped. By noon, the search was over. The missing knife and the blood-stained clothes were serious evidence. "Miss Carter, please come with us to the station to make a statement," Cole said. "She doesn't have to without a lawyer," Deborah interjected. "If Miss Carter is innocent, she has nothing to hide." Emily looked at her mother, then at the detective. "I'll go." At the station, Cole led Emily into an interview room. He turned on a tape recorder and began the official questioning. "For the record, October 14th, 1:30 p.m., questioning of Emily Carter in connection with the murder of Michael Thompson. Emily flinched at the words, "in connection with the murder." "Tell me what you did on Monday evening after 11 o'clock. "My mom went to work. I stayed home, watched TV, read." "What time did you go to bed?" "Around midnight." "Did you leave the house after 11 o'clock? A short pause. "No." Cole detected a hesitation. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I was home all night." "Where's the knife from the set?" "I don't know, it's missing." "Knives don't just disappear. When was the last time you saw it?" Emily nervously fiddled with her sleeve. "I don't remember." "Where did the blood on your clothes come from?" "I cut myself while cooking." "With what knife? The one that's missing?" Silence. Cole changed tactics. "Emily, I understand what you've been through. 3 years of relationship, plans for the future, and then he leaves you for someone else and marries her." Pain flashed in Emily's eyes. "It's not fair. Anyone would feel angry, a desire to fix it." "You don't understand," Emily whispered. "Help me understand." Emily was silent, struggling with herself. Then she spoke quietly. "I gave him everything. 3 years of my life, all my love, all my dreams. We talked about marriage, children, a house. I thought we would be together forever. What changed? And then he said we had grown apart, that it was better to stay friends. How can you throw away 3 years like it's a game?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. 6 months later, he's with Samantha, doing everything he promised me, proposing, wedding plans. It's like I never existed. "And you felt it was unfair?" "Yes," Emily exclaimed. "Why did she get my life? Why did he have the right to be happy and I had to suffer?" Cole realized she was close to a confession. "What did you do with those feelings?" She fell silent, realizing she was saying too much. "Did you go to his studio that night?" Silence. "Michael let you in because he trusted you. What happened?" Emily covered her face with her hands. "I didn't plan to kill him. I swear." Cole's heart began to race. "Tell me what happened." Emily sighed as if preparing to jump. "I couldn't sleep. I lay there, tormented by thoughts of them. I got up, got dressed, and drove to the auto repair shop." "Why?" "I wanted to talk to him, to understand why he couldn't love me as much as I loved him." "What happened at the shop?" "The door was open, the lights were on. Michael was sitting at his desk with some papers. He was surprised, but he let me in." Emily wiped away her tears. "I asked him if he was happy with Samantha. He said yes, very happy, that she was the love of his life." "And how did you feel?" "Something broke inside me. I screamed that it wasn't right, that I'd been with him for 3 years, and she'd only been with him for a few months, that it should have been my wedding." Cole waited for her to continue. "Michael said he was sorry, but he couldn't change his feelings, that I'd find someone else. Someone else." Her voice broke. "As if I could be replaced, like a part." "Then you got the knife?" "I took it from home, I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to scare him." Emily spoke monotonously. "But when he said someone else..." Something exploded inside me. I don't remember hitting him. I woke up and he was lying there in a pool of blood. "What did you do next?" "I took the knife and drove home. I tried to wash the blood off, but I couldn't." "Where's the knife?" "I threw it in the lake." Cole leaned back in his chair. The confession had been obtained. "Emily Carter, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Michael Thompson. You have the right to remain silent." As the detective read her rights, Emily sat motionless. The confession brought a strange sense of relief. An hour later, Deborah arrived with a lawyer. It was too late. Her daughter had confessed, and there was plenty of evidence. "How did this happen?" Deborah cried. "My girl couldn't have killed anyone." Cole looked at his mother and didn't know what to say. Love sometimes turns to hate. The trial took place 3 months later. Emily was charged with second-degree murder, in the heat of passion, without intent. The lawyer tried to prove insanity, citing depression, but the expert report showed that Emily understood her actions. When the judge asked about her plea, Emily quietly replied, "Guilty." The victim's family attended the hearings. Samantha came every time, despite her pain. Before the sentence was handed down, Emily stood up. I want to apologize to Michael's family and Samantha. I took your loved one away from you because of my selfishness. Nothing can justify my actions. I will carry this burden for the rest of my life. The judge sentenced her to 18 years with the possibility of parole after 12. He noted her remorse and lack of a criminal record. Deborah cried as her daughter was led away in handcuffs. She had lost a child and her belief that she had known him. 2 years passed. Aspen returned to its quiet life, but the memory of the tragedy remained. Samantha continued to teach and did not remarry. She regularly visited Michael's grave. Emily was a model prisoner, attended therapy, and repented for what she had done. Cole never encountered another murder in Aspen. He sometimes thought about how love could be deadly and how the human heart was capable of dark deeds. Justice had prevailed, but the scars would remain for a long time, reminding everyone that even in quiet places, human dramas could unfold.